As a fan of the Neptunia franchise, I am so excited that we're finally getting the Neptunia Rebirth Trilogy on a modern console. My only issue is, why is it only coming to Switch? Now, before we get any further within the video, let me explain what the Rebirth Trilogy is to people who don't know about the Neptunia franchise. The Neptunia Rebirth Trilogy is essentially a remake of the original Neptunia games that came out on the PS3 in Hyperdimension 1, 2, and 3. They were remade for the PSP with better enhancements, better gameplay, and just an overall faster, beautiful, polished game. And then those games was eventually put on Steam, where they just kind of buzzed there for years. And then many years later, they released another version called Rebirth, which is pretty much Rebirth, on PlayStation 5. And since then, we haven't had 2 or 3 on the PS5 or PS4 consoles since then. Now, we're finally getting the Rebirth Trilogy on Switch, which makes sense that the Switch has never had these compilation games before, and they are the best within the series because they're the first 3 entries in the series. My only gripe is, why is these only coming to Switch? I feels like when it comes to Neptunia, ID Factory just makes some of the dumbest decisions that comes to this franchise, that it literally makes it seem like they're not trying to let this franchise succeed. I feels like this game particularly should be released on every single console to help more fans and JRPG fans get into the Neptunia franchise, because these particular games were the strongest in the franchise. And it feels like at this particular moment, they do not have the luxury to not put their full aces into 5. Within the month of May, you're getting 5 different Neptunia games. Now, as a Neptunia fan, that makes me excited. 5 games for Neptunia on pretty much every single console, that is amazing. However, I feel like for people who are not fans of the series, it could be a little confusing. And honestly, I don't understand why they stack so many Neptunia games into one month. I can understand that they probably want people to enjoy Neptunia on all consoles, also want to have a fair share of getting more Neptunia in people's homes on every console, but there's a better way to do it. Honestly, I feel like this month should have been focused on the trilogy. If they had this in mind, they were going to be releasing this game, they needed to release this game first before any other game that was coming out this year from Game Art Revolution and Sisters vs. Sisters on the Xbox Series system. I feels like the first game that should have been out so people can have an introduction to these characters and an idea of who they are, besides the people who are core Neptunia fans, should have been the Rebirth Trilogy. This should have been the first game that came out months ago. If it was coming out this month, it should have been the only game that came out within this month, so people could have some time to enjoy the games, to see where these characters come from, between Neptune, Noir, and Bert, and Quant, and just get the idea of what the world is trying to tell. And then next month should have been the release of Game Maker's Our Evolution, and of course Sisters vs. Sisters for the Xbox. Yeah, I just don't understand why the option was the only bring it out on Switch, especially if they're trying to move into the Xbox space. They should have released this game on Xbox and PS4 or PS5, because it just would have made a lot more sense for the timeline and the other games in general, helping people get back into Neptunia, because I feel like Neptunia is at its lowest point right now, because with Sisters vs. Sisters, it turned a lot of people off, especially hardcore JRPG fans and a couple casuals who were just trying to get into the franchise that don't really understand where the franchise is at the moment, because there's been a lot of side games, and that it just wasn't that good of a game. Like, I enjoyed it as a Neptunia fan, and a lot of people who are hardcore Neptunia fans enjoyed it, but your casual JRPG fan dropped it within the first few minutes because the game just was very clunky. The humor and stuff didn't feel as funny, or they didn't get the humor, or they wasn't into the know-how. And I feels like they're shooting themselves in the foot again in having a convoluted release of all these games. So it just doesn't make any sense. So in May 14th, you have Game Art Revolution coming out. Then on May 21st, you have the trilogy coming out on the Switch. And then on the Xbox Series, you have Sisters vs. Sisters, which is odd that it's that first game. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And I am excited, nonetheless, that all these games are coming out. I'm excited that Neptunia Trilogy is going to be coming out again for Switch, and I'm going to get it, you know, regardless. But I just think it should have been released on all consoles, because these games hasn't been around for almost 7 years. And it's been a long time since people even knows what these games are. So it just seems like these games should have been the first priority in the timeline of the game releases, just to get people interested in the franchise again and open it up to more people who possibly wants to get into the franchise. The other thing that's not really clear, if we're going to be getting a physical release in the West, it's only noted that it's going to be getting a physical release in Japan, and it's going to only be digital for the Switch. Maybe they're going to be getting the help of limited run games to make the game for physicals, just like they did for the Mega Dimension V2 as well. And if that's the case, that's cool. I feels like, though, this being their first 3 entries in their main series, this should have took priority over everything else that's in this series, because it's the start of the series, it's the birthplace of everything, and it's the place that a lot of people will probably get into the series from these beautiful characters that they have created. Now, this is just coming from a friend that really loves the Neptunia franchise, and I want to see it thrive and be able to do more things. But I feels like constantly ID Factory is shooting themselves in the foot by messing up this weird timeline in releases that they have for this franchise, and I just don't understand what is going on. I just feels like there just needs to be a better way of handling these games than just speaking to the core audience. I mean, I'm not saying to negate or forget about your core audience, which, you know, for Neptunian fans are going to buy these games regardless. But if you want to reach new heights and want to move forward of making the Neptunia brand a lot bigger than it is, and I feels like they just got to do things better and properly to make it thrive for itself. Maybe I'm overthinking it, maybe I'm blowing it out of proportion, but let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this Neptunia video, maybe you might enjoy this Neptunia video as well. And I will see you guys in the next video. Deuces.
Seem like the life I feel. Seem like the life I feel is a little distant, yeah. Seems like the life I need. Seems like the life I need is a little distant, yeah. Like the river deep, yeah. Seems like my life.